All right, let's dive into something that sounds a little, well, a little weird. We're going to talk about how the most boring, repetitive, day in, day out practice can actually be the secret key, the thing that unlocks incredible skill and, believe it or not, a really meaningful life. So let me ask you this. Could you ever imagine a tennis player who never actually hits the ball? It sounds like a joke, right? But this question is at the center of a true story about a team that did something nobody thought was possible. Okay, so picture this. There's this small, rural town, you know, the kind. And in this town, there's a middle school tennis team that is just dominating. I mean, they're winning provincial championships, they're even competing at the national level. They were the real deal. But the way they trained their new players, it was, let's just say, really strange. You see, for their entire first year, the newbies on the team did all the grunt work. Seriously, they would clean the courts meticulously. They'd level the ground, and then they'd spend hours and hours just practicing basic racket grips and the most fundamental stances over and over and over again. And hitting an actual tennis ball? Nope, almost never happened. And you can probably guess what happened next, right? The other kids walking by were just baffled. They'd see these players doing stuff that looked like chores, just drills, and you could hear them saying, "What are they even doing? How can they get any good doing that? It just seems like a whole lot of work for absolutely nothing." And honestly, you can't blame them. It seemed to make zero sense. So, what was the point? I mean, really? Did a whole year of sweeping courts and just holding a racket actually work? And here's where the story gets good. This is the payoff. The next year, when those students finally got on the court for real matches, they were phenomenal. Absolutely incredible. Even though they'd barely touched a ball for a year, every single shot was precise. It was powerful. The ball went exactly where they wanted it to go every single time. It was like magic. So how on earth did that happen? Well, that whole year of boring practice, it wasn't really about hitting the ball at all. It was about building a rock-solid foundation. All that repetition, it burned the fundamental movements into their muscle memory. It became second nature. Their bodies just knew what to do without even thinking about it. So when a ball finally came flying at them, the perfect, powerful response was just automatic, like they were on autopilot. Now, this story is amazing, but it's not really about tennis, is it? It's pointing to a much bigger, more powerful principle, one that applies directly to our spiritual lives. Think about it like this. When you build a huge skyscraper, what's the most important part? It's the part you never see, right? The foundation. All that work happens deep underground, out of sight. But without that solid foundation, that whole massive building would be completely worthless. It's everything. And our spiritual lives, they work the exact same way. A truly strong, resilient faith isn't built on those big, flashy, exciting moments. It's built on a deep, solid foundation that you lay brick by brick through consistent and, often unseen practice. You know, there's actually a word for this kind of foundational practice. It's piety. Now, that might sound like an old-fashioned word, but in the original language, it carries this idea of reverence and respect. Really, it's just about training the core muscles of our faith. The Apostle Paul actually wrote about this to Timothy, who was kind of like his young apprentice leading a new church. And listen to what he said. He didn't say, hey, just wish really hard to be godly. No, he said, train yourself. He talked about it like it was an exercise, a workout, something you have to do actively and continuously. And the payoff? He said it has value for everything, for this life and for the life to come. Okay, so when we hear that word piety, a lot of us immediately picture a monk in a monastery totally cut off from the rest of the world, right? But that's actually a huge misconception. The biblical idea of piety isn't about escaping the world at all. It's about learning how to live in the world in a completely different way. So what is it then? True piety is the daily practice of living right here in the middle of everything, but doing it in a way that reflects God's heart, a way that actually participates in his work. It's not withdrawn, it's active, it's engaged. And this is the key. Just like with those tennis players, the whole point of this practice is for it to become so ingrained, so much a part of you, that it changes you from the inside out. There was this monk from the 1600s, Brother Lawrence, who wrote about this in a really beautiful way. He called it the practice of the presence of God. And all it meant was consciously trying to remember that God is with you in all the small, ordinary moments of your day. And he said, if you just keep doing it, eventually you stop trying. It just becomes natural. It becomes second nature. But there's an even greater, more powerful example of this idea of practice becoming habit, and it's found in the life of Jesus himself. Just think about the weight of this one line from the Bible. In one of his most difficult, agonizing moments, Jesus went to the Mount of Olives to pray. And the key part? The text says he went there as was his custom. It wasn't a last-ditch Hail Mary prayer. It was his habit. It was his routine. His connection with God wasn't an emergency button. It was a deeply ingrained foundational practice that held him up. So why does any of this matter for us today? Well, because this is how you build real spiritual muscle. It's how you deepen your knowledge of God. This kind of practice literally forms a kind of spiritual guidance system inside of you, an internal compass that helps you make choices and, almost automatically, helps you avoid the paths that would lead to trouble. And all of this really leads to one final question. And it's a challenge, really. Think about those tennis players, just practicing their stances over and over. What is one small, maybe even boring, fundamental practice for you? Maybe it's a few minutes of reading or prayer or just taking a second to be grateful. What is that one small thing that, if you made it a habit, could completely transform the very foundation of your life?